The Polar Express is a 2004 Christmas cult classic, based on a book by Chris Van Allsburg, that, getting out of the way, is just alright. In fact, I'll even say that most of what this movie has going for it is that the songs are beautiful and that the charm does step it up a little bit, but that's the thing. That's all that this movie has going for it. If this was literally any other milquetoast movie, I'd probably just put this movie as being average, because there is quite a bit of things to go through in this movie. But first, let's start off with the plot. This movie stars a kid that literally doesn't have a name whatsoever. During Christmas Eve, out of nowhere, a train pops up to pick him up, and takes him and a bunch of other kids to the North Pole, to which there's a lot of filler in between, and yeah, that's all you get for this one. Now, allow me to start off this review by saying this. 2004 was an amazing year for animated movies. In fact, there are only 2 animated films from this year that I could comfortably say were bad: Home on the Range and Shark Tale. Every other animated movie from that year was classic after classic. But The Polar Express, in all honesty, is the weakest out of all of them, at least of the ones that I find good. Without the charm, in fact, I'd probably even say that this movie is one of the weakest out of all the animated movies that I reviewed so far. Still being better than Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland, and 9, but something that I consider as being close to those two. As for starters, the writing in this movie is really not good, because not only is this movie loaded with filler, but also, while this movie is not as bad with this issue as Home on the Range, the writing of this film is completely over-reliant on plot conveniences to move the plot along. And not only are they plot conveniences, but they're also pointless plot conveniences, as the film probably would have played out the exact same way had these sequences not even been in the movie to begin with. Seriously, did we really need the plot point in the film where Hero Boy, yes, that's who he's named, and I'll be getting into this issue in just a bit, has to return Hero Girl's ticket to her when she wasn't even going to be gone that long? All she was doing was taking hot chocolate over to Billy. All he could have done was hold on to it and wait for her to get back. And considering the fact that throughout the movie, he doesn't believe in Santa Claus, he should have been smart enough not to do this. And Hero Boy causing the train cart to detach from the rest of it doesn't even look like an accident. Seriously, why would he actively not climb the ladder and instead put his foot on the gear that detaches it from the train? I'll tell you why. It's plot convenience. To have all of them be separated from the rest of the group, causing the movie to have some more filler. Look, I get why the film is doing this. It wants to add conflict to make the story much more interesting. Because let's be honest, if the film was just the characters riding on a train and being sit still until they got to the North Pole, it would make the film become very boring. But that kind of shows the issue in making this a movie in the first place. Because the film wrote itself into a corner, they had to throw in as much filler as possible to artificially stretch the film out, instead of letting the plot points progress naturally. I could see this working as an animated series. I've heard that Infinity Train was able to do this well. Like, I could see the Polar Express working as a SpongeBob or Camp Lazlo type of show, where they don't have to explain how long that the train has been going, because the comedy could forgive it, if the film was funny to begin with. But it doesn't work for an animated film, because there's only so far that you could go with the story of characters riding on a train before you'd had to do something interesting. And to the film's credit, they do try to do things, but those things amount to nothing. By the way, this film doesn't have very many jokes, but when it does, they're just not funny. Do you find screaming and hillbilly stereotypes to be funny? No? Well, that's the jokes that we get in this film, specifically with the engineers. Their only purpose in the story is to be clumsy, talk in stereotypical hillbilly accents, and scream most of their lines. And there's also 2 gross out moments in the film that, while they don't get as bad as the Boss Baby or Duck Duck Goose, are worth mentioning. The first sequence is when Hero Boy loses Hero Girl's ticket, and a bird feeds it to her baby bird before the baby spits it out. And that's mainly because I associate mouths with spit. And the second sequence is when Hero Boy is on top of the train with what looks like a ghost, and drinks the refreshments that he gave him, and he reveals that he had a sock in there. there. And it really says something when the characters are so boring and uninteresting that most of them don't even have a name. They have no name. When I tried to look up what the names of the characters are, I literally got the most basic names ever that wouldn't sound out of place for superhero names. The only character that does have a confirmed name is Billy, but that's because his name is said in the film, and even he is not an interesting character. Everyone else, including the important ones, are kept as much of a secret as the Krabby Patty formula. This kind of thing has never happened to me. Usually whenever I'd find an animated movie's cast forgettable, I'd look up the names if I zoned out or would be focused on the more important aspect of a movie, such as the story. Even Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland and Rock Dog, as boring as they are, did give me a list of the characters' names when I needed them, and they all had confirmed names. Or I'd keep watching the animated show in general to memorize the names of the characters. But it's a first time for everything, I guess. Not helping is that the voices themselves are very distracting, as when listening to them, all you can hear is the other roles that they played. The conductor of this train, played by Tom Hanks, is Woody from Toy Story, and that's all I'm going to say about him because he has that recognizable yelling voice and, well, voice in general. And the nerdy character literally named Know-It-All, played by Eddie Deason, is Mandark from Dexter's Laboratory. Not only is he using the exact same voice that he used for Mandark, but he's practically the exact same character. You know how a lot of people get onto Patrick Warburton for the fact that every single character he plays is like Krong from The Emperor's New Groove, pretty much being typecasted to the point where all of his roles blend in with each other? That's pretty much Eddie Deason's role, as every single role that I've seen him in is the smart nerdy character that shows how smart they are by being pompous about it, which was pretty much described in that Jimmy Neutron meme. And it's not even just the same voice actor doing the same voice for a character that plays two completely different roles, like how Tom Kenny used his same voice as SpongeBob for Carl from Johnny Bravo, despite them being different characters with different personalities. This is just Mandark playing another Mandark type of character. His literal introduction is him being what his name implies, a know-it-all kind of character that is close to being what you could describe as a living nerd emoji. And for Billy, allow me to say this right now, I am someone who does like Dandere characters normally. Specifically the kind of character that is shy and timid. You've seen this with characters like Hinata Hyuga from Naruto, Mitsuki from Kappa Mikey, Fluttershy from MLPFIM, Pomni from The Amazing Digital Circus, and even with male characters like Piglet from Winnie the Pooh, Hampton from Tiny Toon Adventures, the original, not the reboot, Courage from Courage the Cowardly Dog, and Izuku Midoriya from My Hero Academia. In fact, it's my favorite kind of trope with characters. But Billy is an example of how not to do this kind of character, because he is the most bland and boring Dandere character that I've ever seen, because there's literally nothing to him. He's just the quiet character who wants to be left alone. That's not enough to make a character interesting, even in an animated movie. What makes Dandere characters interesting is that the products they came from show them having more than meets the eye. Not to mention that they explore their characters and why they're the way they are, making them more likable and interesting as a result. However, Billy is just a nothing character. Not only is he at the back of the train for most of the movie, but he barely does anything plot-wise. Given that a majority of the film is focused on this pointless plot point of Hero Boy needing to return the ticket to Hero Girl, it just makes me wonder why Hero Boy decided to stop the train for him when he wasn't going to do anything for the majority of the plot. I mean, yeah, he does sing a song later in the film, but that's dropped completely as he immediately doesn't want to go with Hero Boy or Hero Girl when they get to the North Pole. Which, yeah, whenever the film is not overloaded with pointless filler or plot conveniences, the film can get very inconsistent with what is shown on screen, or about what it wants to be. So, Billy sings a Christmas song, and he also wanted to go to the North Pole, but wants to stay on the train and not meet Santa. Then why did he go onto the train in the first place? Or the most egregious example that I actually caught on rewatch, so Hero Boy's parents don't believe in Santa Claus, yet they know about the Polar Express.
What? What are you talking about?
And by the way, if you're wondering, the movie does not explain the meaning behind them mentioning this, nor does it explain whether they believe this to be a lie or not. And similarly to the Boss Baby, everything in this film is so nonsensical to the point where I don't blame Hero Boy for thinking that all of this is just a dream, but apparently it isn't. even though more or less, the film portrays itself as being grounded in reality because the Christmas Day scene is presented as much more calm in comparison to the rest of the movie. Also, how did Hero Boy's parents not hear the giant train near their house during the night? It's shown in the movie that they don't live near a train track, and they'd probably get startled awake because the sound of a train is very, very loud depending on how close you are to it, and it was close to their house. And I know this because I myself lived close to a train track, though no, I'm not showing a picture of it for obvious reasons. Are Hero Boy's parents just heavy sleepers or something? And how did his sister not get woken up by this loud noise? Alright. Enough rambling aside, onto the things that I like. One thing that I do like that saves this movie from just being okay or downright bad is the charm. And no, I'm not referring to the motion capture, which could have been worse, but the things that surround the film, such as the music, which I think even those that don't like this movie would probably defend. It just screams Christmas. And even the music with lyrics, even though there are only 2, are very memorable. Also, while the motion capture has not aged too well, it is somewhat passable as a first attempt, because normally, first attempts at a new medium or by a studio do start off rough around the edges but get better over time. Reminder, the first CGI animated movie ever created was Toy Story, which nowadays does look dated in a lot of areas, but patched itself afterwards with The Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles, all being more polished up than the original Toy Story, and feel pretty timeless for the most part. Though yes, we all know how motion capture ended up being in the following years, looking at you, Mars Needs Moms. For a first attempt though, it does look pretty nice. Not the humans, most definitely. I'm referring more to the backgrounds and special effects, which is what I presume that a lot of the money went to, because they look absolutely gorgeous. Though, it is a shame that most of the money didn't go into the humans, because at times they do fall into the uncanny valley more often than not. But the film does still look a little better than Mars Needs Moms, which, reminder, came out in 2011, years after this movie. But with that being said, those are the only things that really keep this movie from being completely average and is now above average. It's not that there's anything offensive about the film, it's harmless enough, and the characters are just bland. But honestly, if it weren't for the things that I pointed out, then I definitely would have given this a 5 out of 10, only being slightly above Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland, but it's now just decent with a 6 out of 10, but just barely. If I could give a recommendation for this film, if you do want to watch any Christmas movies, this could get you into the holiday spirit. I'd still take something like Elf or Home Alone over this film, but there are far worse movies out there. Especially 8 Crazy Nights. But at the exact same time, it's alright.
Everything